Welcome to This Team is Killing Us, a podcast about what the Carolina Panthers do to good people. She is Lauren Brownlow. I'm Dimitri Ravanis. And Lauren, what is killing me this week is the way people are reacting to the Brian Burns trade. I'm not saying, Brian Burns, trade. I'm not saying you don't have reason to be disappointed with the haul, but can we please acknowledge that Dan Morgan and Dave Canales have a lot of unfucking to do of everything that was fucked up before them?
I mean, yes. And honestly, like, it feels weird to say, but I'm okay with everything that's happened so far.
I like a lot of what has happened. I mean, I do wish they had gotten something more back for Burns. I don't even mean a 1. I wish it was a 2 and a 3 that they got back for Brian Burns.
Yeah.
But we'll get into this more. I know they paid too much for Robert Hunt, but when Bryce Young's your quarterback, I don't think you could pay too much for top offensive linemen.
I mean, here's the thing, right? He was a free agent next year. Is that right?
Yep, that's
Burns.
Right.
So essentially, you could have franchised him and had one more year and then maybe not been able to re-sign him even if you want to. You know what I mean? Like, not to mention, like, even trying to. Even if you wanted to next year, you might not have been able to. Then you get nothing. And so... Right. For me, it's like the idea of getting, like, at least they got something. It's a defensive player too. So like people aren't going to give as much, like, I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I think like I'm fine with it. I was pretty happy they got a pretty decent pick out of it. Like 39. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm poor now. We're poor. So the number 39 pick is like letting us eat at a fancy restaurant. Like,
Agreed. I also think you've got to remember, number one, the offer of 2 number 1 picks is not there anymore. It's not like that was sitting there and Dan Morgan chose to take something different. That's the one thing I would say to remember. The other thing I would say to remember is what that offer really was, right? The Rams were offering that trade before the 23 draft with no pick in 23. Like you were going to get picks in this year and next year had you taken that. And who knows what Brian Burns would have done? Maybe that pick from the Rams is not number 19 if he is on that roster.
I think it's fair to say in hindsight, probably should have done that.
Of course.
But they did it. So like you can't work in hindsight. Like, yeah, you should have, because that would have been great to have.
Yeah.
Picks. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, to me, the Brian Burns thing, or I guess the Rams thing, it's not so much me trying to like justify what did or didn't happen. I don't think the gap between what they got and what was on the table, speaking just about first round this year and pick 39, is as big as people think it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I at the end of the day, like, to get something in a situation where they probably ordinarily would have gotten nothing.
Right.
I'm kind of fine with that. Like,
yeah.
I'm as I age, I care less about like how nice something is as long as it's useful to me.
I sympathize with all the people, though, that are sort of comparing this to the Christian McCaffrey deal and going, look, back to back, we have lost the best player on this team without a number 1 pick.
Here's the thing with McCaffrey. You should be more pissed about McCaffrey.
Of course.
That was a deal that they should have gotten more for, because guess what? This league values offensive players more. However, you have to remember at that time, McCaffrey was banged up a lot. There were still some question marks. So like, but could they have still gotten more? I think so. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But like, essentially, you should be like happier still that they got that for a defensive guy that, and it's not even like a defensive tackle or some position that's like harder to find. I'm not saying Burns isn't good. Like, obviously Burns is good and he's going to be very valuable. I'm not saying he's not, but you can replace a guy like that and his production a lot easier than you can some other positions. So.
Obviously, the highest profile celebrity that is making his complaints known is LukeCombs, country singer who, by the way, Lauren, I had to be told which Luke this was because I'm not a country
I don't know fan. Either. So yeah, I've heard the name. So I'm like, oh, that guy.
Yeah, when someone said the fast car guy, I was like, oh, okay. Still, like, I couldn't picture him.
Is it really?
Yeah, I couldn't.
Oh.
I don't know that I could pull him out of a crowd, but at least now I know who to associate the name with.
You know what? I'm so glad that a dude who looked at Tracy Chapman with such reverence when he brought her on that stage with him and made me cry in my home is a Panthers fan.
I think
good for us.
I'm pretty sure he was the celebrity picker when game day went to App State a couple of years ago. I think he's a Western North Carolina guy. Anyway,
Eric Church, maybe, I don't know. He's a country guy that likes sports.
Yeah, but I think isn't he a big Carolina guy? Isn't he the one that canceled
some of these guys are? Some of these guys will dabble.
I got to be honest. I got to be honest with you. Like, game day is a really good mechanism here, because whenever game day's guest picker is a 30-ish white guy I don't recognize, I ask Twitter golfer or country star, because those are the two areas that I have no scope for.
It's usually a country star, I feel like.
Right. LukeCombs was on the Pat McAfee show voicing some of what he tweeted. This was actually pretty good audio. I'm going to play this for you.
I saw that picture on the screen, and God, those were good days, man. The dab those were good times. You know what I mean? Kuechly, those were good times. You know, feels like a century ago, man. It's tough right now.
What do you think? What do you think, though? How long is this going to happen? We got Canales in there. He did go with Tampa down Baker. Morgan, he didn't blink his whole press conference. The guy didn't blink one time. Super football guy. This is good news, right, Luke? Here we go. We're back to being optimistic.
I don't know, man. It's like I'm, you know, I obviously don't know Dave at all. You know, I'm sure he's an awesome guy, but I don't get the hype behind hiring the offensive coordinator for the 20th best offense in the league.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I mean, that's just, to be completely honest, you know what I mean? Like, what are we talking about here? There's 20 other guys.
I mean, an offense that's like probably, I'm guessing, 11 spots higher than the Panthers.
Yeah.
That's something.
Do you think 11? It had to be 12. Whose offense could have been worse?
No, there was or did they finish last? I know that they were competing.
Sure.
With like the Steelers at one point.
Oh, wow.
The Giants were down bad. So they were in there. I saw some of those last at some points in time when I went to look at the stats.
I wanted to play LukeCombs because, you know, he obviously had the reaction on Twitter that everybody was talking about to the Brian Burns trade. Like, I get it. I get the buildup of, I don't know what it takes to excite me anymore, but I want to circle back to where you and I started. I don't have a problem with anything they've done so far. The two things you and I have been talking about since before the offseason began, wide receiver and offensive line. They have made serious efforts to improve in both of those areas. Did they go out like my first thought with the Diontae Johnson, I texted you this, is clearly they asked about T. Higgins and heard no. Like, there's no reason you do this otherwise. But then you realize they're probably going to cut Diontae Jackson anyway. Maybe this Higgins thing, maybe another big receiver is not off the table yet.
Again, yet another instance for me of getting something in a situation where they ordinarily would have gotten nothing. And that's what I like to see. It's you're maximizing your value essentially. And like, I don't really know a lot about Johnson. I did text my Steelers beat reporter friend, and she did say very good with the media. They love him. He always talked, even when it was tough, except one time when Minka Fitzpatrick tried to fight him, which understandable. So like he won, I think he either won or tied for like one of their media awards, which I was like, okay, cool. I think maybe he gets, from what I understand, he plays a little feelings ball a little bit. And so at the same time, it's like the risk reward of it all, right? Like, what if he sucks? Oh, I don't know. What if he sucks? Who cares? What if the entire offense sucked like it did last year? I mean, we've seen it. Can it? I can't say can it get worse. Don't ever say that, Lauren, because yes, it can. But yes, and, you know what I mean? But like, it's like, okay, this is, it's a guy that seems to be, by all accounts, like a decent enough dude, I guess. It's just he gets in his head a little bit. And I will say, I told her too, I was like, I have to remind myself, maybe in my own team, I don't have as much patience for this, like as a fan, but as a media member, I am an absolute sucker for head cases. They are my favorite kinds of people because, hi, I see you. We are.
Yeah, the feelings ball thing concerns me. So Lauren forwarded me this text from her friend, and my immediate reaction was, I don't know that I have the confidence in Bryce as a pro right now not to join Diontae in the feelings club if things are going like they did last year.
True, but you know what I did think of was like, what do you hear about Dave Canales, right? I mean, if anybody played feelings ball, it was a guy like Baker Mayfield.
Sure.
So like maybe he just kind of needs a dude that can wrap his arm. Like, I'm not saying Mike Tomlin isn't a guy that will give love, because he will, but he's a little more still like old school dad, tough love type of guy, where maybe Canales is a little more like, hey, let me be on your level and show you some empathy and love and give you some confidence that you can do this. And like, maybe that will help him. I don't know.
Feelings folks understand that sometimes the guy or gal you need in your corner showing you support is not the person you go home to, right? Like it can't be your parent. It can't be the one that is already in that role or has been in that role for. Exactly. They are contractually obligated to love you. Before we move on, real quick, I do want to address offensive line, Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt. So the guards positions are solidified. I talked to Mike Golick Jr. earlier this week because I was trying to get a gauge on, with all this movement. Like, after, granted, it was a bad season for Icky last year, but after one bad season, when you are invested in the guy the way you are, do you already start to talk about position moves? Do you already start to talk about moving him to the right side if you think there's a better left tackle option? He told me that he has seen over and over again teammates in college, guys in the pros, that really, like, the ones that end up turning it around are the ones that have coaches that recognize you've got to give a guy a chance to rebound. I think Icky took a lot of arrows, and they were earned last year. I think Canales probably gives him another shot at left tackle. So that means we have 2 question marks on the line now, where before we had 5.
Yeah, that's better. Although my only hesitation slight, because I think even when you texted me the guard signing, I'm like, oh, but it's a guard. Right. And like, that is this isn't me trying to say I think they need to be signing Icky's replacement or anything. I'm not even necessarily saying that. I just think they need to make sure they have some depth there. Mm-hmm. And that's maybe a later on in the offseason type of thing to shore up. Maybe that's a mini camp thing to shore up, getting some free agent guys in there. Although I don't want free agent tackles anymore. I don't want undrafted. No offense to people who are undrafted. I know some of you end up being good, but let's not pretend that that's like the not the exception instead of the rule. Like, I don't want them having to build their depth that way, ideally, but at the same time, like, they do need to build. I would love it if, I wouldn't say have someone in there necessarily to challenge Icky, because I don't know that that's going to be the best thing for if you're trying to get him confident.
It also may not be realistic.
Right. That too. That's the big thing. But can you get somebody in there that maybe is like a vet on the downside that will take less money, that is, although why would you take less money to play for this team? Let's be honest.
So, but so not at tackle, but I actually had this thought about center. I mean, all of the cap cuts that the team made got snapped up pretty quickly, except Bradley Bozeman. Like, is there a scenario where Bozeman comes back in a different role at a much lower contract to provide that depth you're talking about?
I mean, maybe they're fixtures around Charlotte. Like, they do a lot of, he and his wife, I see it all over Twitter all the time. So you never know. I mean, it's a possibility for sure. But yeah, I mean, I just think the biggest thing is depth. And like, I mean, Icky really struggled last year. I hope it was just a bad season, but it was like all season.
No, for sure.
And that's a big, and I just haven't seen much happen yet to address it. Maybe they're waiting on it. Maybe they've got somebody in the draft. They really, like, I don't know. I don't know where they're going, but that was initially my first thought, because it did seem like a lot of money for, for that position. But hey, shore it up, man. Let's batten down the hatches. I do need to issue well, it's not really a correction, because I think we assumed this anyway, but yes, you were right. The Panthers were the worst offense in the NFL, slightly worse than the New York Jets and the New England Patriots, and then the Giants. So, and the Titans, which I didn't know were that bad.
Look, the Panthers were at the bottom of the league, and we don't even have a vice presidential candidate on the roster.
Yet. Yeah, we don't know that.
That's true. That's true. All right. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this show wherever it is you are getting it. If you're watching on YouTube on the OG Triangle Media page, click that bell. It gives you an alert every time we post a new video. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, click subscribe and then take a time to leave a comment. All of that stuff goes into the algorithm that helps put us in front of new eyeballs and ear holes. So take the time right now. I don't know what else to call them. It is OG Triangle Media on YouTube, and then obviously this team is killing us wherever it is you find your favorite podcast. Lauren, I'm going to step aside and just let you bid a fond farewell. Dangle your handkerchief out the train window as we move away from FrankieLuvu.
Okay, I guess that was the one thing. I mean, it is what it is. Like, I guess they just didn't love him the way I did.
It is clear the teammates loved him. I'm surprised because he was such a culture guy.
Like, they talk about wanting a dog. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's not like a huge concern necessarily, but it's also like, all right, you're saying you want all these things. And if I'm one of his teammates who they all adored him and like we all, as fans, we all saw like that dude played his ass off every week, even when most of us would have been like, fuck this. So, you know, I love him. I love him so much, like this ray of positive sunshine and light. And I just hope that like the message isn't sent that like, oh, maybe they weren't that serious about committing to players like that.
What is interesting to me is, especially as you frame him as a ray of sunshine and light, now you choose to go to Washington? Like, that seems like a place where optimism goes to die. And I know that, you know, it's not the Dan Snyder era anymore or anything like that, but isn't
it's Panthers slightly less north?
That's what I was about to say. Isn't there enough history of Panthers players going to Washington to never be heard from again that he should have taken into account there?
I mean, there's plenty of players that end up in, like that end up there and never are really heard from again. I mean, look, he's trying to maximize his own value. And at the time when it's going to be like to come off a year like the Panthers had and to have that much value as a player, it says, like, how's it going to ever get better than that? I don't, you know, to have a season like that and still be valued like that, I think is fantastic for him. And you gotta look, you do in this world, like not just in pro football, in life too. Even sometimes, like, you got to maximize your value when you can, because you never know when that window of your value being at its highest will slam shut. And then you have no more value.
For sure. I mean, he's 27. He's in the prime of his career right now, got a 3-year deal. So, you know, assuming he goes to Washington and that franchise begins a serious turnaround, he'll get one more bite at the apple at 30 years old. Like, I get it. I, like you, am disappointed, because we talked so much about the attitude that Dan Morgan says is needed in this locker room. Letting Luvu go, even though you bring in guys that I like, A'Shawn Robinson, obviously another Alabama guy. Josie Jewell is a guy that Ejiro Evero has spoken very highly of during his time in Denver. That's great. Letting Luvu go when he fits everything you are talking about, and I get it, it's a tough sell, I think, for players. Is it just kind of comes across as it's not necessarily that we want dogs, we just don't want you.
Yeah. Oh.
And I don't mean that for Luvu specifically. I just mean, like, it almost feels like Morgan is coming in and not evaluating who can help and who matters.
It's almost like,
he walks in, he sees 2 and 15 on everyone's forehead, and everything that can be replaced needs to be replaced.
I mean, it could have just been like a straight up business decision. Like, ideally they would have loved to keep him, and they just felt like whatever moves they had left to make or whatever else they wanted to do, that he wouldn't fit into that. But and maybe he didn't want to take less, maybe last season beat it out of him too. And in which case I get it. Like, maybe honestly, if you could have a season bad enough to go, you know what? I need to go play for the Commanders.
Yeah.
Then it would have been last season.
Not wanting to take less is an interesting thought because I don't know about you. I've been surprised by how much the Panthers have been able to do this offseason.
No, me too. I mean, I wasn't expecting to have been like sitting here. I'm not used to that either. I feel like they're not usually as active during free agency. And that dates all the way back to like Jerry Richardson, who
when they announced the Robert Hunt deal specifically for the amount they announced it for. I mean,
the amount was what got me. I'm like,
well, I thought, okay, that's it. That's the big move. It really does make the offensive line better, but we're not going to be seeing anything else. And then it's like, man, the next day, 5-6 moves got made.
Listen, I like Diontae Jackson a lot too, but like the idea that you could take a chance on a receiver that certainly has potential.
Mm-hmm.
You only have to worry about him for 1 year in Johnson. If he doesn't work out, you can just cut him.
Yep.
And you get rid of a player who was good when he was healthy, but that wasn't very often.
Yeah.
Like, and so you end up getting something for somebody that you would have just cut. And like, that's the type of move. Honestly, I think that's the move for me that I was the most like, you know what? I like the direction they're heading in here. Like, I think that's a good, you're getting something for not nothing, but but essentially, and because the Panthers far too often, I think, end up they wait too long to get rid of a guy or they, And so I'm glad that they're being more proactive on that front. Like the fact that I'm not used to seeing them get people back for valuable commodities that they get rid of.
That seems like an NFC South disease, right? Waiting too long to get rid of somebody. Because I can think of examples on the Falcons roster, on Bucs rosters of the past. I mean, the Saints forever waited too long to get rid of guys. That feels like something very specific to this division.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's why we're all united and suck. And it's why a lot of us are still very resentful of the Saints for trying to act like for a couple years they were better than us. Because no, you're not. We know you had bags on your head. We saw you. We know we are all kind of in some ways joke franchises, and that's fine. It's who we are. Although I feel like the Atlanta Falcons would do well to remember that.
Yes, agreed.
When they're trying to like dunk tweet on LukeCombs, like, hey, you want a team that like imagine acting like you would be the team to not put him through a personal hell every weekend. Whoever tweeted that, I don't think watches Falcons games.
To be fair, this is the risk you run when you appear in public in multiple jerseys from the same league.
I mean, yeah, that's
it's fair. Really shame on LukeCombs in that sense. All right,
that's just the country star hustle.
Very true. Let's end where we began with the Brian Burns trade, specifically what is coming back, specifically pick number 39. So now the Panthers are sitting there with 33, 39, and 65. What is the Lauren Brownlow ideal of what you do with that?
I mean, I think receiver still needs to be a priority. If there's a tackle that slips there that you really like, I think you take him. I do not want to see them take a tackle just because if that's not somebody that they truly believe in. That's always how I've been. You go for need, but not a reach. Like, and if there is a player there that has like somehow slipped there and honestly, I do believe in this too. Like regardless of position, there's a player that just like slips to you and you're like, wow, I got to have like this guy's still here. I'm fine with taking it. But yeah, I mean, obviously, like for me, defensive back depth is important. Offensive line depth is important. Wide receiver. I think wide receiver would probably be my ideal because there's, you can always draft a guy that could be pretty good for you.
Right.
That late.
And listen, that's why I look at 65 and remember, like Puka Nacua, 5th round pick, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4th round pick, Cooper Kupp, 3rd round pick. Like you can find your alpha dog receiver later on. And I am in love with Xavier Legette from South Carolina. I think he would be there at 65. I think he's a big, tall speed guy that could eventually become your number one. And I think there's so much.
One. Wow.
Yeah, I think so. But I think there's so much depth at wide receiver that you can reasonably assume he will be there at 65.
So, I mean, I think like if they don't take a wide receiver with their first pick, I would be pretty surprised/disappointed, but it would, I mean, I always like to see who they actually pick before I freak out. Sometimes there's a guy that's really good just sitting right there. Maybe he had a bad physical or something like that, and teams are panicking. Maybe he gave some answer about what kind of tree he would be that upset some people.
Right.
Like, I mean, who the hell knows with these psycho teams?
No, for sure. And see, this is weird because a guy that I thought could be there for them at 33 had the opposite thing happen to him. Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia, who all year long was one of those guys that, like, he's got the size, he's got the strength, just the footwork and the processing is not all there. He struck me as a guy that you could start on the right side and maybe eventually he grows into the left. And even if he doesn't, you've got a great presence on the right side of the offensive line. Man, he is shooting up people's mock draft boards right now. I think you would have to trade to get into the first round if that's who you wanted.
I'm not an offensive line guru. Perhaps this question is best asked to someone like a Golick Jr. or somebody like that can. But I'm also, when you tell me there's concerns with footwork and processing, that concerns me.
No, for sure. I mean,
because to me, that when I watched Icky this year, processing and at least processing was a concern.
Yeah,
like processing where my man is to block.
Right. I think once you get past, I might even say before you get to J.C. Latham from Alabama, like there's 3 tackles in this draft that you look at and you go, okay, I can see it in the NFL. Everybody else seems like a project, and I'm operating from the idea of we're picking at 33. And you got to accept that's a project.
If there's like 3 of those guys, then you would probably think that I don't want to see them take a tackle just to take a tackle.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my biggest thing. Like, don't just take somebody that has a lot of question marks like that high when you could have had a better player at a different position. That's my pet peeve. Like, I hate when teams do that. It's like, oh, go based on need only. It's like, no, you shouldn't just do that because there might have been a much better, like, that's the type of draft that people will look back at in years and go, wow, the Panthers drafted so-and-so when that guy was on, like, I can't stand that philosophy in general. But yeah, I mean, I think that those are the positions that they'll prioritize the most. I was a little, I mean, I guess since Luvu left, they had to sign a linebacker, so that's probably why that signing was made too. But
and listen, we know they've met with Chase Young. They're still going to meet with DJ Wanham and Jadeveon Clowney. Like, clearly they are not done here yet.
Clowney?
Yeah. I mean, look, everywhere he's gone on a prove-it deal, he's proved it. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. I was hoping they'd get a deal done with Chase Young. I really was, because I also hate – look, I recognize this from my time as a Buccaneers fan. Certainly, I hope Icky does well and turns it around. I hoped J.C. Horn would be a little bit more reliable than he is, and I still hope he turns it around.
Yeah.
This feels very familiar of, hey, let's consider the local fan base when we're drafting, and not just like if it's neck and neck, let's consider the local fan base. So I feel a little bit, for lack of a better term, I feel a little bit icky about DJ Wanham and Jadeveon Clowney, because I don't know if that is purely we think this guy could be the guy as much as it is, hey, they played 90 minutes down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's weird. I mean, I don't know that I hear you, but I don't know that that's necessarily why. Like, if anything, I have felt like over the years, they've almost resisted making a pick that could have, like, I think there was the Clemson linebacker. His name's escaping me. I think
Peter Boulware, right?
No.
Brian Boulware.
No, more recent than that. It was like 3 years ago or something like that. It was during a COVID draft. And I was like pulling my hair out that they didn't, because I thought he was a really special player.
Oh, yeah. The guy that Clemson sort of used alternating as safety and linebacker, right?
Yeah. That's the guy I wanted, and they didn't take him. God, why is his name escaping me right now? This is driving me. This is what happens when you get old, kids. I can tell you every lyric to several 90s rap songs and can't remember that name that I was like really significantly pissed about, like not that long
Isaiah
ago.
Simmons.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Isaiah Simmons. Yes. Like that. I mean, and so like that would have been an easy way to go. They've had chances to draft like quarterbacks and whatnot for locally and gone the other way. So like, I feel like, and maybe this is a shift in direction. I don't know. Like maybe this is also them trying to throw the locals a little more of a bone of like, hey, we are drafting people from your schools. Please come watch them.
Yeah.
Not understanding that several of the Clemson fans will show up for their guy, and South Carolina fans will show up for their guy, but maybe some of the others.
All right, let's wrap here. You've got 39 now in the draft. Is 33 in play for a trade?
Depends on what you can get for it. I mean, again, like I would rather keep it personally because I think that's a great place to be in. I'm not saying it makes up for losing your first round pick because it doesn't.
Sure.
But it's like having 2 early picks in that second round. I think that's a really good opportunity for them. Like if there's a good trade to be made, I'm do it. But I also the further down in the draft they get, the less I trust them so far. We'll see if they can be better than I think. But this particular, like the last couple of years, I feel like drafting in the later rounds has, like, if they take a quarterback in this draft, I'm going to throw something.
Oh, there's no way, right?
Hi, Matt Corral. Remember him? Like, I almost broke. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why? Because you can get a good player in the 5th round. Like, don't
let me throw one specific scenario out there for you. The names we hear attached to T. Higgins are Kansas City, Carolina, and New England. I don't think the Bengals want to make Kansas City better. So then it comes down to who has the better pick to offer, Carolina or New England. And if you can get T. Higgins for 33, are you happy with that?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes. Sign me up for that, please.
I mean, I've been looking at this a lot, and the consensus seems to be late 1, early 2 for T, and Kansas City and Carolina get thrown out there a lot.
Don't give both.
No, don't give both. That's ridiculous. Also, by the way, I didn't realize this. If Dan Morgan and Dave Canales are totally committed to a long-term rebuild, do you realize how much money the Panthers are going to have after the 25 season? Like, they are going to have so much money as, like, Justin Jefferson becomes available. And there's some other ones as well.
Right. Like, you don't have to, like, fix your wide receiver room in 1 year. But
exactly.
if there's a chance to get a guy like that and, like, you know, he wants to come there, I guess.
Right.
Because that does matter a little bit.
No, that's true, because Higgins is a really good case of you don't just have to trade for him. You have to trade for him and get an extension done to make that work.
Right. But he's local, so you never know. You know? I mean, maybe. So, yeah, I don't know. But I would like to see them at least, like, I mean, to me, I don't think that pick is, like, because you would pick someone that you hope would be as good as T. Higgins with that pick, you know, or better.